Hello?
Bex, I was wondering if you could do me a favour.
Yeah? What's up?
I'm sick as a dog, but I don't want to call in sick because I'm short on cash. Could you could you cover my shift and I'll split the pay with you, yeah?
Sure. I'll bring Freakshow along so I won't get lonely.
Sweet, you're the best, Bex.
Rebecca and Freakshow, Episode 3, Night at Terry's. Chapter 1, One Long Night. The bell on the front door rang as it closed behind Rebecca and Freakshow upon them entering Terry's fast food. Rebecca had agreed to cover Ellie's night shift since she was sick, in exchange for half of her paycheck, and she had brought Freakshow, who was in their female form, along so she had someone to talk to. Before they arrived, Ellie had sent Rebecca a text detailing what the job demanded. From 11 PM to 7 AM, they needed to watch security cameras that were located both inside and outside the building, as well as make hourly rounds of each room, along with checking all possible entrances to ensure they were locked or haven't been broken into. All in all, a fairly easy job, with the only real challenge coming from staying awake for so long, a task that by this stage Ellie was practically an expert at. However, Rebecca wasn't used to staying up so late. The latest she would ever go to bed at would be around 1 in the morning if she was having a particularly bad day. Freakshow, however, shouldn't mind so much, as Rebecca was fully convinced that they actually didn't need to sleep. As the pair crossed the dining area towards the staff area where their office was, Freakshow glanced nervously towards the stage. Its dusty red curtains drawn, however, through a small gap between the large swathes of fabric, Freakshow caught a glimpse of the restaurant's namesake, Terry T. Rex, an animatronic mascot made to entertain kids. Or so Rebecca claimed. Freakshow couldn't fathom how something so horrifying and creepy could be fun for children. They found it, as well as all other animatronic creations, to be utterly horrifying. Freakshow averted their gaze from the yellowed rubber face of the animatronic, just barely visible amidst the shadows, and turned to the wall opposite the stage. It was painted a dull grey, with the top of the wall leading to the ceiling being cracked and peeling away. There were posters on the wall featuring a cartoony version of Terry, which was far less terrifying than the animatronic itself. In some of them he was eating pizza, others he was playing games, and in one of them he was wearing a party hat and bursting out of a birthday cake, with large bubbly text underneath saying, "Roarsome." A little bit of wordplay Freakshow couldn't help but cringe at. "Alright, here we are," Rebecca said, flicking the light switch inside the security office. The room was small, with only one chair and a desk with an old-looking computer with a console connected to it that was used to switch camera feeds. The only other decorations in the room was a clock, which didn't appear to work, a locker in the corner of the room, and a small overflowing bin underneath the desk, as well as a poster on the wall showing Terry bearing a big toothy grin. "So, do you want the chair, or...?" Rebecca asked Freakshow as they leaned against the wall. No, you can have it. I don't mind sitting on the floor," they said, seeming uncomfortable in the small space. Rebecca sat down and pulled out her phone, looking at the time. It was 11:05 PM. It looked like the pair would be in for a long night. After about 5 minutes of sitting in silence, Rebecca remembered that before they left the house, Freakshow said they wanted to show her something. She'd completely forgotten about it up until that point, but seeing as they were going to be here a while, Rebecca decided she might as well remind them. "Hey, Freaks, didn't you say you wanted to show me something?" she asked the demon, who was sat cross-legged on the floor staring at the wall. They perked up at the question. Oh yeah, I did!" they exclaimed, jumping up and stepping forward to the table. They unbuttoned the chest part of their shirt and reached inside. When Freakshow took on their new female form, they decided to move their hammer space pocket to the inside of their bra, something they seemed to find immensely funny. Rebecca had no idea Freakshow had such a raunchy side, although she supposed the clue was in their name, Freak Show. From their shirt they pulled out a large blue book, the thickness of which reminded Rebecca of the copy of Stephen King's It she'd been given on her 15th birthday from her mother. The edges of the royal blue cover were tipped with golden metal accents. The label on the cover was written in a language Rebecca didn't recognize, Demion le Coeur, Freakshow called it, more commonly known as Demon Speak. According to them, the text simply said, Spellbook. They dropped the heavy tome down on the table, it making a heavy thud as it landed. They flipped through a number of pages before seeming to find the one they were looking for. Aha! They said, pointing a glossy green nail at a page that was similarly written in this demon speak. However, there was a subheading to the page that Rebecca was able to make out. Fusion? She said confusedly. Yeah! Apparently this spell, when said by 2 or more people, can fuse them together and make them even stronger than their base parts. Rebecca looked puzzled at the page. Can demons fuse with humans? She asked out of curiosity. Freakshow paused for a moment and read through the page. It says here they can, they said, adjusting their glasses, but only for a short period of time. The pair spent the next 5 minutes talking over the spell, before returning to silence. "40 minutes passed, and the pair were bored to tears. Rebecca was watching a video on her phone, and Freakshow was alternating between different forms and walking around the room. At this moment, they were in the form of a Persian cat, with a fluffy purple and green tail, and a smaller version of their sun hat resting atop their furry little head. The freak cat pounced onto the desk and sat in front of Rebecca, who was reclined back in her swivel seat, staring at her phone. "Rebecca?" Freakshow asked, catching her attention. "Ellie told me your birthday was coming up. Would you like to do anything nice for the occasion?" They asked, tilting their little cat head in a curious manner. Rebecca paused her video and thought for a moment before answering. "There's this new film coming out that I really want to see called Sonic the Hedgehog. It's based on a game I like, and I thought it looked really good," she said with a smile. Freakshow tilted their head again before shifting back into their base form, the desk creaking a little under the new weight. "Sonic the Hedgehog? Sounds a tad odd. I'm in! When does it come out?" They crossed their legs, sitting pretty on the small, cluttered desk. "Valentine's. I'd like to have had a date for then, but I don't mind seeing it with a friend for my birthday." The pair smiled at each other before the room went quiet again. Rebecca then noticed the time on her phone screen. "Oh, it's 12 a.m. Come on, Freakshow, we need to do our rounds," she said, pocketing her phone and getting up. Freakshow winced. "Can't I just stay here? I could, watch the cameras while you're gone," they said with wide eyes and an unsure smile. Rebecca giggled before crossing her arms and saying, "Oh my god, Freakshow, are you scared?" She asked with a humoured tone. Freakshow's face flushed grey before saying, "No. Why would I be scared of a silly wee place like this?" Their smile was still very unsure, almost as if their face didn't know what their mouth was saying. Rebecca giggled again before taking Freakshow's hand and leading them out of the office. "Come on, Freakshow. This isn't like Five Nights at Freddy's. The animatronic here doesn't actually come to life at night. Come on, I'll show you how friendly he actually is," Rebecca said chipperly, as Freakshow was beginning to regret coming along with her. Chapter 2. Automatonophobia. Re-entering the dining area, Rebecca let go of Freakshow's hand and went through a door to the side of the stage. Freakshow nervously fidgeted with their hands before the curtains opened, revealing Terry in all his not-so-glorious glory. Rebecca stood next to the towering dinosaur mascot, whose head was tilted down slightly with his mouth open a bit. If Freakshow could sweat, they'd be wiping ice-cold droplets off their brow. A few weeks prior, Rebecca had introduced them to a horror game she liked, in which you played as a nighttime security guard in a family pizza restaurant with animatronic characters that came to life at night and tried to kill you. After playing for a while, the pair discovered that Freakshow is, in fact, deathly afraid of robots. A fact that Rebecca did find a bit funny. Freakshow was a powerful and near-ancient demon who's seen horrors no human could comprehend, and their biggest fear was little metal men. "Here he is!" Rebecca cheerfully cooed before turning around and heading backstage once again. Freakshow, actively trying not to give in to their fight and flight instincts, stepped closer to the stage to talk to their friend, all the while fearfully eyeing the cold, red eyes of the machine. You're awfully chipper tonight, Rebecca. What's the occasion? Freakshow asked, trying not to get too close to the animatronic. Rebecca then called out from the control room. I don't know. I guess it's because there's no customers here to annoy me. And besides, she paused as she was getting the show program ready. I'm here with my best friend. What more could I want? She said as she exited the backstage area. As she did this, the lights on the stage turned on, casting Terry in red and purple light. Rebecca stood next to her taller friend as the show began. Terry shuddered to life with hydraulic clicks and hisses, as a rock and roll version of Happy Birthday began blaring through the dusty speakers. The mechanical dinosaur opened his mouth as a forced southern accent came over the speakers.
Hey kids, I heard it was someone's birthday. Well, let me show you how we like to do birthdays here at Terry's. Sing along if you know the words.
The machine moved in a jittery and unnatural way as it began to sing along to the words of this corny cover of the birthday song. Freakshow was bewildered and afraid of its motion, which looked like a reanimated corpse being puppeteered by unseen strings. They gave an uneasy glance to Rebecca, who was looking at the robot with a small smile on her face. That was before the music suddenly stuttered, slowed, and then stopped altogether, with Terry spasming before halting his movements. Aw, man, he broke again, Rebecca said defeatedly. She looked back up to Freakshow, who seemed to be staring off into space, not fully registering that it had stopped. Rebecca's expression then shifted to a sympathetic gaze as she placed a hand on Freakshow's arm, jolting them back to reality. Come on, let's finish our rounds and I'll make us some coffee. She smiled up to them. Freakshow looked down to her and smiled back before letting out a tense breath. I'd like that, they said as the pair turned around to get back to work.
You two ain't going nowhere,
a voice called out in a forced southern accent. It was Terry. But that shouldn't be possible. Not only was he switched off, but that line wasn't even recorded for any of his performances. Rebecca and Freakshow slowly turned back to the stage, where they saw Terry standing and staring at them, with a yellow glow beginning to rise behind his plastic eyes, turning them golden in the shadows of the deactivated show stage.
I heard one of yous has a birthday coming up.
The machine spoke, as his body began to undulate and move, almost as if he was trying to wrench himself free from the stage which his feet were bolted into.
And here at Terry's, we like to have fun at birthdays,
he snarled, as with a horrifying snapping of metal and wood, he tore one of his large, fiberglass feet free from the stage, causing Rebecca and Freakshow to shrink into the wall, terrified and confused by something they both knew shouldn't be possible. Terry flexed his now freed leg, bending a joint that Rebecca knew wasn't there. He thudded his foot back down onto the wooden stage as he began working to free his other foot.
That's why I can't let y'all leave yet, 'cause we're gonna have some,
Terry said before his other foot was freed, causing him to topple over onto the tiled floor in front of the stage. His pneumatic limbs twitched and hissed as his movements halted once more, as he was now lying on the floor in a heap. Rebecca and Freakshow stood in stunned and fearful silence for a minute, before Freakshow finally spoke up again. You said he couldn't do that, Rebecca. They stammered through gritted teeth. Rebecca stepped forward towards the downed machine. He can't. Or he shouldn't be able to. As she stepped closer, Terry suddenly jolted, causing Rebecca to halt in her tracks. Without any sounds of his mechanics, Terry's limbs began to move on their own. At first, twitching and flailing, like an infant learning to crawl, before finally finding their rhythm. The machine began to rise, getting up off the ground slowly. Freakshow rushed over and grabbed Rebecca's hand as the robot was now standing back upright. The yellow glow came back to his dead eyes as he opened his mouth again and growled out,
We're gonna have some fun!
Rebecca and Freakshow both screamed and ran out of the dining area, back to their office, as Terry reared back and let out a mechanical roar. Chapter 3. Can You Survive? Rebecca slammed the door to the security office as her and Freakshow burst into the room. As soon as they were inside, Freakshow placed the chair under the door in order to stop it from opening. Freakshow, that won't work, that chair has wheels! Rebecca called out. Freakshow then tried to remove the desk to use it as a barricade. No! That is the camera system on it, we can use it to see where he is! Freakshow turned back and scowled. And then what? Because I'm not sure you noticed, but we have no way of defending ourselves! They were in full panic mode. Rebecca had never seen them like this before. It made her think back to just before Christmas, the mall, with armed men threatening them, and the whole time, Freakshow was there for her, comforting her while she was terrified. It made Rebecca realize that it was now her turn to be there for them. She gently approached them and put a hand on their shoulder. Listen, it's gonna be okay. We just need to get past him and get to the car and we'll be out of here, okay? She smiled reassuringly at her friend, and Freakshow could feel their anxiety beginning to leave them. Oh, okay, they said, still slightly unsure. You said we should check the cameras, yeah? Rebecca nodded and walked over to the monitor. She pressed a few buttons on the terminal and the cameras switched feeds, showing different rooms in the restaurant, until they eventually found where Terry was, but to their dismay, he was blocking the entrance. Okay, Rebecca said, thinking on what to do next. There's a back entrance that leads to where the bins are. We might be able to sneak out there. Freakshow sighed and was about to remove the chair from under the door handle, which was when they remembered something. Yeah, hang on a minute, they said. I could just use one of my portals to get us out of here. Rebecca's face fell in surprise and she let out a sigh. Oh my god, Freakshow. They let out a nervous chuckle before waving their hand to summon a portal. Only for nothing to happen. Eh? They exclaimed before trying to do it again. They tried 2 more times before completely giving up. I think there's something here blocking me some magic. They furrowed their brow and snapped their fingers a few times, trying to spark a small flame from their fingertip, but once again, they were unable to. Oh, crap! They cried, once again opening their shirt and reaching into their hammerspace pocket, Rebecca averting her gaze as to not see Freakshow's breasts, only for them to not be able to pull out anything. No, 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 no! They cried again, pulling their hair in stress. What are we gonna do? They screamed, grabbing Rebecca by the shoulders and aggressively shaking her. She managed to wriggle free and shook Freakshow's shoulders in return. For God's sake, Freakshow, snap out of it! She shouted at her fearful friend, which shocked them out of their panic. Look, Rebecca said breathlessly. All we need to do is get to the rear exit. It's down the hall from where we are right now. If we're quick, Terry won't even notice us, okay? She was determined and had no fear, despite the terrifying situation the pair were in. Freakshow was taken aback by this, as Rebecca was usually meek and timid, but it seemed that she was suddenly emboldened to be brave. Freakshow wondered if, perhaps, they were rubbing off on her, as typically they were the one running face first into near uncertain danger. Freakshow nodded, and together, Rebecca and Freakshow removed the chair from the door and opened it. Slowly creeping towards the door, the pair stayed very close together, hugging the wall as they shuffled along. Freakshow kept looking around in all directions, thinking Terry could appear at any given moment to get them both. Dude, can you quit looking around like a scared owl? You're freaking me out! Rebecca hissed in a whisper, but Freakshow continued to dart their head around like a small mammal being hunted by a large predator. It was then that their worst fear came true. From the side of the hall that led down to the dining area, The pair heard what sounded like humming. They turned to where the sound came from and saw Terry's hulking form blocking the doorway. The air fell silent. There was a tense moment that lasted only seconds, but to Rebecca and Freakshow, it felt like hours. That was when the light above Terry flickered, momentarily plunging them into darkness. But when the lights came back on, they saw him barreling towards them at breakneck speed, snapping his jaws and screaming. Freakshow immediately shrank down into the form of a rat and scampered away. Since their shapeshifting was natural to them, the mysterious magical blocker had no effect on this ability. Rebecca saw Terry getting closer and knew she had to act fast. Right as he came close enough to bite down on her head, she pushed off on the wall and leaped out of the way. She tumbled to the floor and began crawling away, as Terry began to prepare for another attack. Rebecca watched as he twisted his torso around to face her and began lumbering backwards towards her. She jumped up and ran into the dining area, looking around either to find Freakshow or somewhere else to hide. But with Terry on her tail, she had to be quick. That was when she saw the entrance of the arcade on the other side of the room. She bolted towards it, and once inside, she ducked behind the furthest games cabinet, right as Terry entered the room. The light outside the room was suddenly blocked out by the huge shape of the burly animatronic. He lurched into the room with heavy, clomping footfalls, each one causing the paint on his feet to scuff and chip.
Rebecca,
he hissed out, which caused Rebecca to break out into a cold sweat. He knows my name, she thought as he began to step forward.
I heard your birthday was coming up. Well, you know how we like to do birthdays here.
He chuckled as he started forward to the arcade machines.
Happy birthday to you!
He sang out, ending the verse by yanking the nearest machine away from the wall with frightening strength, the glass of the cabinet shattering as it made contact with the carpeted floor. He continued his song. Each time he said, "you," he wrenched another cabinet away from the wall, each one getting him closer and closer to Rebecca. She was panicked. She wanted to escape, but if she ran now, Terry would catch her. There was a vent next to her, but even if she could get the cover off, there was no way she'd fit inside. Rebecca was trapped at the whim of the mechanical T-Rex, who was now approaching the machine she was hiding behind.
Happy birthday to you!
He ripped away the cabinet, exposing Rebecca like a mouse beneath a piece of wood. She shrieked as Terry kneeled down and picked her up with his huge, unmoving plastic hands.
I'm gonna rip you open like a piñata!
The robot snarled as Rebecca kicked and squirmed. Even though he couldn't move his hands, he had her in a vice-like grip. Why is he so strong? Rebecca thought. She knew he was only a machine. There's no way he should be able to do any of this, right? As Rebecca was held in his clutches, she noticed something off. Just beneath the cheap fabric that covered his torso, she could see something moving. Something slithering just beneath the cotton sheath. What is that? She thought, but couldn't dwell on it for too long, as Terry opened his mouth and was about to bite down on her. But it was then that Rebecca found her resolve and kicked the machine in the midsection. It was a reflective response, a survival instinct. But strangely enough, it actually seemed to hurt the metal dinosaur. He winced and dropped Rebecca. On the way down, she instinctively grabbed on his t-shirt for balance, but the fabric ripped and she fell onto the cola-soaked carpet. She scrambled to her feet and began running, but turned around to see Terry swiveling to face her, now with a large hole ripped in his shirt, exposing his metal endoskeleton, which had a writhing black mass clung to it. Rebecca stared puzzledly for a moment before snapping back to the reality of the situation. She turned heel and ran out of the room, back into the dining area, but Terry wasn't far behind. Before Rebecca could find another hiding place, she was suddenly grabbed from behind and thrown to the ground.
I found you!
Lucky me!
Terry bellowed with a chuckle, as if they were playing a game of hide-and-seek. Rebecca tried to get up, but Terry placed one of his massive plastic feet onto Rebecca's chest, pinning her to the ground and knocking the wind out of her.
Let's see how long it takes to pop you like a balloon!
Terry taunted. as Rebecca felt him beginning to press down on her chest. She gasped as the air was forced out of her. She was dripping with sweat, and her face was shifting from a flustered red to a grim purple as she was beginning to suffocate. The corners of her vision began to blur, but as she looked up at the machine, she could see the golden glow behind his eyes growing stronger, and the black mass in his chest seemed to be more active, writhing and wriggling in what looked to be excitement. But she wasn't able to focus on it for too long, as soon her vision blurred to the point where she could barely even see his outline. Terry pressed down harder. An audible snap echoed in the room as one of Rebecca's ribs broke. She tried to scream, but no sound came out, only a cough of blood. Her head fell back as her eyes began to flutter shut. Suddenly, Terry was violently thrown off of Rebecca. As the air began to rush back into her lungs, she weakly rolled onto her side to see what had happened. Terry was getting back up. The fall had broken off one of his hands, as well as one of his eyes, exposing a metal peg that the plastic orb would have attached to. And standing in front of him, guarding Rebecca, was Freakshow, who had smoke billowing off their body, as well as an orange glow emanating from beneath their skin. Rebecca could also feel an immense heat from their frame. She immediately recognized this as demonic rage. Her mind flashed back to the last time she had seen them like this. The mall, their form becoming a huge burning dragon, and they nearly killed her and their friends in a blind rage. Freakshow's eyes were solid black, and their painted lips were curled in a hateful snarl at the animatronic, who was gazing at Freakshow with his remaining eye that still maintained its golden shine. The glow under Freakshow's skin grew brighter, as their veins bulged and burned with hell flame. And before Rebecca knew it, Freakshow's mouth burst forth a bright pillar of flame. But before it made contact with Terry, his one eye also shifted black, as the mass inside his chest began to writhe and glow the same orange. It was then that from within his mouth, a similar pillar of flame surged outward, colliding with Freakshow's in an epic display. Rebecca was in awe of the sight, never seeing anything like it. The heat from it was enough to make her begin sweating again, even though by now she had managed to put some distance between herself and the fighting pair. Freakshow was shocked by the display, but didn't back down. They intensified their own blaze, the flames licking at Terry's rubber face, causing him to back down from the attack, fleeing with a speed that should have been impossible for the decrepit machine. Freakshow bellowed after, and was about to give chase when their attention was suddenly called elsewhere. Freakshow! Rebecca called out, causing them to turn to face her, hunched over like a movie monster. They stared at her with their blackened eyes, burning drool seeping from the corners of their mouth, sizzling as they fell to the floor. They lurched forward with a similar gaze of blind hate, and Rebecca realized that she'd made an enormous mistake. Oh no. She stammered and tried to back away, as the burning beauty took another step forward. Freakshow, please, you know me. Another step. It's me, Rebecca. Another step. Their glow grew. They opened their mouth, and Rebecca could see the rising light coming from their throat. She began to panic, tears flowing from her eyes like waterfalls. Freakshow, please, I'm your friend. I love you. She shrieked as she felt the burning of their body mere inches from her. But nothing happened. No flames, no roaring. Rebecca looked up to find them halted in place, their eyes still dark, but now with a sympathetic gaze on their face. Rebecca? They said, their voice unnatural, but filled with sorrow. Rebecca could see orange, burning tears forming in their eyes. When they streamed down their face and fell to the ground, they burned small holes in the tiles. The tears themselves seemed to be made of liquid fire. Their eyes shifted back to normal. As the glow dissipated from their skin, they stumbled, but Rebecca caught them, only for her knees to buckle, causing them both to fall to the ground. The pair hauled themselves back to the security office, miraculously without running into Terry again. They sat down on the floor in front of the door, blocking anyone from outside the office opening it with their bodies. Their breathing was heavy and laboured. Before falling to this state, Freakshow had given Rebecca a small vial of a healing potion they had in their pocket. Not from Hammerspace, but their regular pocket. They had brought it with them before leaving the house. As it turned out, Freakshow always took potions with them anytime they went outside, even if they were just going to the shops. Better safe than sorry. Their male form once said to Cammy and Rebecca in the middle of their local Tesco. Freakshow? Rebecca panted. Are you okay? Freakshow sat shell-shocked, with a 1,000-yard stare, and yet they still managed to choke out a response. Oh, they said, barely above a whisper. Rebecca rested her head on their shoulder and took a hold of their hand. Freakshow didn't protest this, and after sitting like that together for a short while, they began to feel better. Thank you, they said, sounding exhausted. Rebecca smiled weakly before saying, I'm sorry I dragged you out here. I never should have agreed to cover for Ellie. She sighed, before Freakshow suddenly bolted up, having come to a realization. Rebecca, they said, turning to her. Terry was using demonic rage. Freakshow was wide-eyed in shock, and after a second of thought, Rebecca's eyes also widened. Oh my god, you're right! And oh! She jumped up and began pacing around the room. He also had this weird black thing in his chest. It was like all slimy and weird. It kind of looked like venom. Ignore that, you don't know what venom is. She began to ramble, as Freakshow also came to their feet. This must mean he's being possessed by a demon! Rebecca stopped and stared at them. She was still finding it hard to believe that this was her life now, chasing around demonically possessed animatronic dinosaurs alongside another demon, who she shared a house with. If that's the case... She paused, realizing what she was about to say sounded insane. We have to stop it, which means we can't leave yet. Freakshow looked at her and winced before collecting themselves again, and nodding in agreement. Alright, what should we do? Rebecca looked around the room for a bit, before her eyes settled on the camera system. She marched over to the desk and began flipping through the feeds. We need to find him. We can't stop him if we don't know where he is... Wait, what is that? She said, pausing after settling on the camera feed of a storage room. The room was almost pitch black, since there were no external windows inside the room. The only available light coming from a crack in the door, and from a mysterious glowing pillar in the center of the room. Freakshow approached and looked at what Rebecca saw, and their eyes again widened like saucers. That's a magic suppression spire! That's what's blocking my use of magic! They said with a snap of their fingers. A magic? What? You know what, never mind. Freakshow, if we can somehow turn that thing off, would you be able to use your magic again? Freakshow nodded. Okay. Rebecca smirked. Here's what we do. Chapter 4. Security Breach. Scurrying along the tiled floor down the hall from the office, Freakshow had shifted into the form of a mouse so they could get to the storage room without being detected by Terry. They vehemently didn't want to do it. However, Rebecca couldn't, as if they were really dealing with another demon, if she was caught, she'd have no way to defend herself, whereas Freakshow at least had the ability to potentially fight back. Once inside the room, they morphed back into their base form. Using their enhanced vision, they were able to get a decent look at their surroundings. The storage room was lined with shelves topped with all sorts of random objects. Some had tools and utensils, others had cleaning supplies, and one was full of dusty toys and plush versions of Terry used to fill a lone claw machine in the arcade. Freakshow quickly located the spire. It was around 3 foot tall, with a stony texture. The bottom was thicker, forming a base, and along the length of the spire were multiple indents, which were pulsing with a snow blue light. They approached the object and kneeled in front of it. From where they were in clear view of the security camera, with Rebecca able to see them from where she was inside the office. But as Freakshow began to tinker with the object, the feed suddenly cut out. Huh? Ah! Broken piece of junk! Rebecca gruffed, hitting the side of the monitor. Freakshow sat in front of the spire, examining it to the best of their ability with their night vision. They could make out runes on the base of the spire, which they knew if they touched in the right sequence it would deactivate the magic suppression. But as they were looking at the magical device, they heard a noise behind them, something shuffling amongst the shelves. They whirled around and looked at the rows and rows of shelves, but saw nothing. Thinking they had imagined it, they returned their focus to the spire. Bugger! They cursed after another failed attempt to turn off the spire. I can't make heads or tails of these bloomin' runes! They returned to trying to get their head around the object, which was when they heard another sound. But this one they knew was definitely real. It sounded metallic, like someone wearing armor. Freakshow turned around just in time to be grabbed by the throat by a figure shrouded in the darkness. Before they could get a good look at them, the figure covered their entire head with one large hand. They kicked and squirmed for a bit as they felt their windpipe being crushed, which was when they shifted their coattails into a prehensile appendage and, grabbing the spire, they extended the pseudo-tail and raised it before smashing it on where they assumed the head of their assailant was. They heard a myriad of sounds all at once, but namely a metallic thud, a pained grunt, and heavy stones hitting the floor. The figure dropped them, running back into the shadows, making a sound akin to hooves against the hard floor. But by the time Freakshow was able to look, the figure was gone. They sat there for a brief moment, breathing heavily, which was when they noticed the large clumps of rock lying in front of them. They had managed to break the spire against the head of their would-be killer. After staring bewildered at the stones for a while, Freakshow raised up their left hand and snapped their fingers, which, to their shock and delight, created a small spark like a lighter. Freakshow leaped up and snapped again. This time, a small flame came out of the tip of their index finger. Yes! Result! They cheered, jumping up and punching the air. However, their celebration was swiftly cut short by the sound of Rebecca screaming from down the hallway. 5 minutes earlier. Broken piece of junk! Rebecca gruffed, hitting the side of the monitor, which didn't seem to fix the camera issue. She leaned back in her chair, which creaked as she pivoted backwards. She sat for a moment before feeling a pit in her stomach. It seemed the stress of the night had made her hungry. Rebecca considered running to the kitchen to find something to eat, but very quickly rationalized that that would be a horrible idea. Which was when she remembered that Ellie mentioned keeping snacks in her desk drawer. Rebecca pivoted forward and opened the top drawer of the desk, and inside found an unopened packet of Oreos, as well as one empty wrapper. Never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you're such a fat-ass, Els. She said to no one before reclining back in her seat and tucking into her literal midnight snack. She got about halfway through the packets, which was when she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the computer screen. Rebecca frequently wore baggy shirts in order to hide her body, but due to the way she was sitting, the rounded shape of her gut was fully visible. Seeing the visage of her plump face scarfing down a whole packet of biscuits made Rebecca feel disgusting, and so she decided to put them back where she found them, inside Ellie's desk drawer. Even though Rebecca was in a far better place mentally after meeting Freakshow, moving on from her self-loathing would be a long and hard process. As much as her friends tried to help her, and as much as she didn't like telling them, Rebecca still truly hated herself. She winced and sat upright, pulling on her shirt to hide her belly, despite the fact there was no one there with her to see it, and it was still fully hidden beneath her shirt. She still felt as if she needed to hide herself. However, she was swiftly broken out of her train of thought by a sound from down the hallway. It sounded like something hitting a metal surface, followed by falling rocks and hooves? She got up from her seat and opened the door to the office. She peered out and looked down the hall. First to her left, nothing. Then to her right, which was when she was suddenly blindsided by Terry, who grabbed her by the throat and lifted her into the air. His hand was jagged and cracked. It had been snapped and broken in a way that allowed it to move freely. Rebecca screamed when she saw Terry's visage. His rubber mask was melted, with the edges of his mouth curled up in a way that resembled a snarl. His empty eye socket was partially covered by melted silicone, while the other was twisted into what looked like a scowl. He opened his maw, Rebecca seeing the telltale glow of hellflame beginning to burn from within, which was when Freakshow suddenly tackled Terry to the ground, who dropped Rebecca as he went down. Before the possessed machine could do anything else, Freakshow tore open their shirt and pulled an axe from within. In the blink of an eye, they swung at Terry. His lower jaw fell off as his head spun around with the sound of gear stripping and metal creaking. Terry fell to the ground once again, but began twisting his limbs backwards and rising up like a spider. Freakshow grabbed Rebecca's hands and they ran back into the office, closing the door right as Terry was about to reach them. He pounded on the door as the pair tried their best to keep him out. Behind the door, they could hear him howling with distorted laughter. Freakshow sprouted tendrils from their back and used some of them to grab the desk and one to yank Rebecca away from the door. They then pulled themselves away as they wrenched the table away from the wall, sending the computer, console, and spellbook crashing to the floor as they thrust the desk in the way of the door. For a while, Terry kept banging, howling and roaring the whole time. But after a while, he gave up, seeming bored of this game, and the pair heard his thudding footsteps as he walked away from the office. The pair caught their breath. So much had happened within the space of just 5 minutes, and they were both a little shell-shocked. Rebecca looked to Freakshow, confused, as she swore she'd seen them with an axe just a few seconds ago. Where'd you get the axe from? She panted. Freakshow turned around and smirked. They cupped their chests with both hands before saying, "Here, love, broke the spa and got my magic back," they said pridefully. Rebecca's face lit up at this, realizing they now have a fighting chance. While she was thinking of what they should do next, Freakshow located the spellbook, which, despite being violently flung from the table, was still open on the page with the fusion spell, which got the gears inside Freakshow's head turning. "Freakshow," Rebecca called. They turned around to put the book back into their hammer-space pocket. "Could you get us some caliprods from your pocket? We might be able to stop Terry by electrocuting him." Freakshow thought for a moment, before reaching into their shirt again, pulling out 2 long metal rods with taser prongs on the end. The pair grinned at each other as their plan was coming together. Chapter 5: Symmetry. With steely determination, Rebecca and Freakshow stomped down the hall back towards the dining area. Upon entering, they could see that the door was unguarded, and Terry was nowhere to be seen. Freakshow stepped forward, swallowing their fears. "Show yourself, demon!" they taunted. But for several seconds there was nothing but silence. The pair looked around at the dining area, back to back, trying to find any trace of where Terry was. That was when the lights on the stage buzzed to life, revealing Terry now standing there. He hadn't been there before, though, and the pair were befuddled as to how he had managed to get there without them hearing. Terry's melted visage glared down at them. Now missing his lower jaw, it exposed part of the metal frame that made up his head. His metal neck and inner jaw were both scorched, and under the lights they could see the swirling purples and blues indicative of burnt metal.
"The party ain't over yet,"
Terry said in a glitchy voice, tilting his head upwards in a shuddering motion, as well as raising his withered arms in a grandiose gesture. He jumped off the stage with a thunderous clatter. He clenched his remaining shattered fist, and bellowed a mechanical scream, as his one eye shifted black and an orange glow began to rise off his form. Rebecca and Freakshow acted fast. At this point, being a team was second nature to them. Rebecca went right, and Freakshow left. As Terry barreled towards the center of the room, the pair flanked him on either side. They both thrust their cattle prods towards him, Rebecca getting him in his empty eye socket, and Freakshow in the hole in his chest. "Time for your controlled shock," Rebecca smirked, as in unison, her and Freakshow clicked their tasers on, sending electricity surging through the metal dinosaur's body. He seized up and twitched. His eyes shifted back to normal and rolled upwards into his mask. And as they retracted their prods, he fell to the ground with a loud clatter. The pair looked down at his smoking metal body, finding it amusing that it was just that easy. The pair shared a high five before heading towards the door, ready to put this nightmare behind them. But As they tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. They struggled with the exit for a while before the lights began to buzz and flicker, and they heard a shrill laugh coming from behind. The pair slowly turned around to find Terry beginning to rise off the ground. He wasn't done yet.
You thought you could defeat me that easily? Fools!
Terry spat, in a voice that didn't sound like his own. Rebecca and Freakshow silently deduced that this must be the voice of the demon controlling him.
I will pull you both limb from limb, and decorate my form with your bones as trophies.
The machine hissed, stomping forward. Rebecca and Freakshow readied themselves for another fight. Freakshow still terrified of the metal menace, but trying their best to hide it. And Rebecca knowing deep down she wouldn't be able to do much, but didn't want to show it. There was no time to be afraid. They had to fight. The pair lunged at Terry, who simply stood stoic. Rebecca didn't hesitate to throw punches at the machine, but they did nothing to faze him, and Rebecca seemed to be hurting her own hands as opposed to Terry. Freakshow, on the other hand, found themselves stricken with fear once more. Every time they tried to get close, Terry pivoted his head towards them and stared with his remaining dead eye. And because of this, they were barely able to land a hit. That was when they got frustrated at themselves for being so cowardly. They threw a fist in Terry's direction, which he blocked with his arm. As Freakshow's eyes widened, Terry caught the next punch Rebecca threw his way with his shattered hand.
Weak!
The demon snarled, throwing Rebecca to the side with ease. Seeing this, Freakshow felt the rage beginning to boil over again. Which was when Terry then grabbed them by their face, reminding them of the encounter they had in the storage room. Terry lifted them into the air, and Freakshow could see the black mass inside their chests beginning to writhe and thrash in excitement.
I'm going to enjoy finally putting an end to you, Freak Show!
The beasts said, with venomous emphasis on their name. But why? Did this demon somehow know who they were? They didn't have time to think about it, however. As Terry threw them across the room like a rag doll, they flew through the serving window that led into the kitchen, thudding into the large pizza ovens, causing them to dent. Freakshow rose to their feet, seeing through the window that Rebecca was laying on the floor of the dining area, with Terry lumbering towards her. Thinking fast, they waved their hands and opened a portal directly beneath her. She fell through into another portal just above Freakshow, landing in their arms, the jolt waking her back up from her unconscious state. Terry swiveled around the room, trying to find them. Freakshow ducked down behind her counter, sitting Rebecca next to them. The pair said nothing, but shared a glance that said it all. We're screwed.
Come on and fix me, you cowards!
The demon roared after searching for a while, with Rebecca and Freakshow still hiding in the kitchen, the pair holding hands in a way to comfort the other. What are we supposed to do against that? Rebecca said, defeated. I'm not strong enough to fight a demon-possessed robot on my own. She sighed. And I'm too afraid to face that machine. Freakshow whimpered. They were great at working together, but it seemed that in this scenario, together wasn't enough on its own. Together. Freakshow suddenly bolted up with an idea. Whoa, Freakshow, what gives? Get down! Rebecca whisper-yelled before being pulled up by Freakshow as they reached into their shirt and pulled out the spellbook. They thudded it down on the counter and reopened it to the page they had shown Rebecca at the beginning of the night. The fusion spell. Rebecca, they started. We work best when together. But we need more than that for this. We need to be one. We need to fuse. Rebecca stared down at the page confused for a moment, before her face changed to that of determination. Okay, she said confidently. What do we need to do? Freakshow smirked and pointed to some of the demon speak on the page. This says Dominic Omnus Unum. We need to chant this 3 times in unison for the spell to work. Rebecca thought for a moment, before trying to repeat the words. Donic no. Omnes Unum. She grinned, and Freakshow smiled back before they joined hands and began to chant the spell. Donic omnos unum. Donic omnos unum. Donic omnos unum. Their chanting faded into one another as light emanated from their palms as the fusion process began. Terry stomped around the dining area, searching for its prey, the demonic sludge inside the machine vibrating with a euphoric anticipation for its kill and fulfilling its goal. But as they continued their hunt, they heard odd chanting from the kitchen. But before they could investigate, they were suddenly blindsided by a fist into its face, followed by cackling laughter. The demon turned back and saw pale hands with green painted nails reaching out of the serving window, preceded by a bizarre mixture of two voices. Oh, yes! This feels good! It cackled again, before, like a stone being flung from a slingshot, a figure burst out of the window and into the dining area. The figure was neither Rebecca nor Freakshow, but it did share some of their traits. A black sun hat, a long coat with a flannel pattern of green, black, and purple, with a grey t-shirt underneath that bore a green 13 design. A skirt made from jean material, with frayed ends above the knees, and long black boots, all above a slightly pudgy frame. This wasn't Rebecca or Freakshow. It was Rebecca and Freakshow. Terry's remaining eyelid rose in surprise.
Fusion between a demon and a mortal!
It bellowed in confusion as the fusion smirked and adjusted a monocle-like lens above their left eye, before they cackled again. Our power, our strength, combined as one! They grew their fists to the size of cannonballs, before stretching their arms like rubber, their fists thudding against the ground. We are Horror Show! They called out as they stood on their tiptoes and began spinning rapidly like a whirling top, their fists being flung outwards in all directions. Terry barely being able to avoid being hit multiple times as the whirlwind of fists and cackling got closer. The fusion halted their spinning and gripped into the ceiling, rising themselves up into the air and kicking Terry, once again causing his head to twist around. Terry stumbled backward before swiveling his head back around as the demon chuckled.
This is perfect. With you fused, I can kill two birds with one stone. Perfect symmetry!
It roared, as Terry began running towards them, eye black and hellfire glowing beneath the rubber mask. But Horror Show wasn't phased. They stretched a hand out and grabbed Terry's torso, throwing him across the restaurant into the stage, the machine getting lodged into the wooden floor. As it attempted to get back up, the fusion jumped in front of the stage and began to pulse with their own fiery glow, as their eyes swirled black and green.
What?
The demon croaked, as Horror Show erupted with fire from their mouth towards Terry.
Impossible!
The demon bellowed as Terry was engulfed in flames, his mechanical limbs flailing in what could only be described as agony. The flames from the fusion putrid out, and they stretched up to be on the stage, staring down at the melted and scorched machine. As they looked down at what once was Terry T-Rex, a white glow began to emanate from their chest, which then spread through their whole body as the pair unfused. The machine lay in a heap, half buried into the show stage, his clothing scorched, fully exposing his metal endoskeleton, with the demonic black mass seeming still. His mask was all but gone, melted away and having slothed off, with the only remaining rubber around the edges still bubbling and oozing from the heat. The pair looked down at the animatronic for a while longer as it lay completely motionless, before they decided to turn around and leave. They heard as they were about to open the door and leave. Rebecca and Freakshow turned back to the stage to see Terry facing them. Having pulled himself free for one last goodbye, the black mask beginning to drip and fall off the metal skeleton. His metal lower jaw rattled up and down as the machine gave its curtain call.
We'll meet again. Don't know where. Don't know when. But I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
Terry sang before the mass in his chest finally slopped off, causing the machine to halt completely before falling limp. Finally, the night was over. Rebecca and Freakshow turned back and left the restaurant, not noticing the black substance pulling itself away from the stage. Once outside, the pair both let out tense and devastated sighs. Their night at Terry's was over, and they could go back home. However, as they walked to the car, 1,000 questions swirled in their heads. They remained silent for a while after getting in the car, and before Rebecca turned on the ignition, Freakshow asked the first question. What was that song about? They asked, in reference to the strange song Terry sang before being deactivated. He always sings that at the end of every day. Having Terry talk to customers like friends encourages them to come back. According to my boss, anyways. Rebecca said, ending with a tired sigh. Before she herself had a question. Who's Lilith? She turned to Freakshow, who looked similar to how they did in their mall escapade. Paler, and with dark circles under their eyes. Rebecca couldn't help but think, they look like shit. Freakshow paused for a long while, before finally answering. Lilith is my real name. The car fell silent for a while. Rebecca shocked by the revelation that whatever was inside Terry knew Freakshow personally. She wanted to say something, but what could she possibly say in this moment? The pair drove home in complete silence, with neither of them uttering a single word until the moment Rebecca pulled into the driveway. I think I'm going to quit, she said flatly. Freakshow turned to her. Yeah, they said, sounding exhausted. Yeah, I hate that place. I hate that job, now more than ever. So it's time to find something new. She smiled weakly at Freakshow, who smiled back. The pair were about to get out of the car when Freakshow suddenly felt something. Or rather, they sensed something. A familiarity they couldn't quite describe. They turned to Rebecca, who, upon noticing this, turned back to face them. What? She asked confusedly, before Freakshow all of a sudden, and without warning, placed their hand on her chest. Rebecca blushed briefly before scowling and batting their hand away. Hey! We were just nearly killed by a robot demon, and now you want to touch my tits? She shouted. Freakshow, being unfazed, replaced their hand on her chest before saying, I'm not touching your tits, I'm touching your heart. Rebecca was about to protest again, but that was when Freakshow's eyes suddenly shifted solid black, like they did in their rage form. Rebecca shifted backwards, cutting the touch between her and Freakshow, causing their eyes to shift back to normal. What was that? Rebecca asked, gasping slightly from the small shock. Freakshow looked between their hand and Rebecca a few times before finally responding. I felt something. Something inside you. I had to be sure. They paused for a moment before continuing. Rebecca, you've got demonic rage inside you. Rebecca was shocked. How could this be possible? How could she, a mortal, possess something only demons had? Are you sure? She stammered. Freakshow bore a thoughtful look. It seemed even they were confused by this. They weren't sure if this is even possible. And yet, it seemed as if it very much was. It could be a side effect of us fusing? A remnant of my essence still lingering inside your form? Rebecca wanted to know more. know how this was possible, know what it could do to her. But she was exhausted, and she could see Freakshow was too. Let's talk about it tomorrow, yeah? She smiled weakly again, and Freakshow did the same. The pair went back inside, and immediately fell asleep on the couch, holding each other in a warm and safe embrace. Slithering away from the restaurant, the demonic slime sloshed under a crack under the back exit of the building, and into the crisp night air. As it moved, it began to take on a shape. Tendrils of sludge fused and formed into a hand, then an arm, followed by another, which then attached to a torso that grew a head, with warm grey skin beginning to cover its surface. Bones and organs filled the forming body. The head growing 3 yellow eyes and long, deep brown hair. The bottom of the body formed into long, digitigrade legs ending in hooves, with a thick tail swaying behind their naked form, with a tunic and pants quickly growing over, followed by shiny metallic armor and a flowing cape. The armored giant stood in the night, overlooking the nearby ocean, thinking over their monumental failure. However, their train of thought was quickly broken by a vibrating within their pocket of their pantaloons, similar to what one would feel when getting a message on their mobile phone. However, what the demon pulled out was not a phone, but instead a small stone, a magical device called a communication stone. The demon winced, knowing this message would not be pleasant. They threw the stone against the ground, causing it to shatter, and from within came wisps of magical fire, which formed into a projection showing a dark silhouette, with 6 blood-red eyes, and a head topped with 6 gnarled horns. The demon kneeled before the projection before speaking to it. They croaked in a shrill voice. The silhouette stayed silent, before the armored giant continued. The dark god's eyes squinted in disapproval. His armored disciple began to crack under the pressure. They were halted with a choke as they saw the god raise a 6-fingered hand in front of his form. They didn't know what he was doing, but whatever it was, it would be their punishment for failing him. The dark god lowered his hand.
Speak.
He spat, in a voice that was both smooth and yet filled with sharp malice. His disciple struggled for a bit, before finally being able to choke out words that did not feel like their own. What? My voice! They clutched at their throat as they heard human English escape their lips. My voice! What have you done to my voice? They rose from their kneeling stance in shock, only to see their god raise his hand again. They felt a cold grip on their throat as they were thrust back to the ground by an invisible force.
Know your place, Paladin.
The god hissed.
I have replaced your voice with that of a mortal. All things considered, this is a mere slap to the wrist, with all your pride bruised. But make no mistake.
He leaned into the projection, the demon catching a glimpse of matted black fur from his face.
Feel me again, and I will bathe in your blood.
He let go of the telepathic hold he had over his follower. They gasped for air as they returned to their proper kneel. It will be done, my dark god. The god said nothing, and the transmission ended, the communication stone fusing itself back together. The demon reclaimed it and put it back into their pocket, before disappearing back into the night. This isn't over, Rebecca and Freakshow.